Hello, this is Cotton Stoops and welcome back to another Lumion Legacy HTUC video. And today's video is on the second ever roamer to be released in the Halloween event, and that is Nevermare. Nevermare is actually a pretty interesting and unique Lumion for a roamer, so let's talk about it. From counters and checks and teammates to the sets and roles Nevermare can play, as well as the weaknesses, resistances, and immunities Nevermare has, this video will teach you how to use and counter Nevermare. So in order to know how to use Nevermare, you must ask the question, what role does Nevermare play? We can answer this with its base stats. Its base stats are pretty simple, because its HP and range attack are the main things you should not use. Its range attack of 46 is half the damage of Gobademic basically, and its HP stat will be taking less hits compared to other stuff like Valkyrie and Zeppelin. However, it does have some good melee defense of 89, which is on par with Zeppelin, which is pretty good, and it kind of alleviates that weakness in the HP stat. And of course, it has really good energy, melee attack, range defense, and speed, all above 100, which is actually pretty good. Its melee attack is on par with things like Volkaloa, Borak, and Tyrex with no boosts. Its energy stat is actually really high compared to a lot of other Lumions, which allows Nevermare to use a lot of moves in a very quick succession. And its speed of 111, it does outspeed stuff like Garlash, Volkaloa, other Nevermares potentially, as well as Metronets and some other stuff as well, which is overall pretty nice. So, what role does Nevermare play? Nevermare can be a decently strong and fast Lumion, just like Metronet. It's a pretty good cleaner slash sweeper, and of course it has great potential to set up mainly against range attackers. While its HP is still very low, that range defense does make up for it, so that's pretty good. With that out of the way, let's talk about Nevermare's weaknesses and resistances, as well as its immunities, so let's get along with that. Nevermare's typing of Plant and Spirit is actually pretty good defensively. It does have 5 weaknesses to Fire, Ice, Bug, and Ancient, and Spirit. However, while those are pretty bad, it does have some good 4 resistances to Water, Plant, Earth, and Typeless. Typeless type moves come from stuff like Valkyrie with Raging Howl, Taoshinus, and possibly Luricats are some stuff you should be watching out for. Water types like Barblast, Luminami, Suakame, and some other stuff is pretty good to switch in on, and I guess C.B.O too. Plant types like other Nevermares and Totabs should be some plant types you should be switching in on, and Earth types like Borak, Tyrex, Zetamars are some great Earth types to be switching in on. And some major resistances you have is the electric typing, which basically means you can switch in on Zulong, Eleguana, Elephage, Phagenat, and Zulong, which is pretty good. And you have 2 immunities to Light and Brawler. Light types like Valkyrie, Nevermare, and Luminami are some stuff you can switch in on safely, and Brawler types like C.B.O and Wrestling are some good stuff to switch in on. So with that out of the way, let's talk about Nevermare's set. So Nevermare's first set will be the Cleaning set with the ability Razor Sharp. You can of course run Frenzy, but Razor Sharp is a lot more consistent and helps you crit more, which is basically pretty good because your other moves have a high crit chance. And the personality will be Nimble. You can run the Clumsy personality, you don't have to, but running pure personalities is the best. And its moveset of choice will be Thistle Slash, Primal Slash, Phantom Slash, and Bulk Up. You can of course substitute these moves for other moves if you think it's necessary. However, I think this 4 moves is probably the best moveset you can run, so there's not really any point in running the others. And the items of choice, Spirit Essence, Plant Essence, Power Cuffs, and Health Amulet are some good stuff you should be using. We're not using shells here because Nevermare is sweeping, not trying to do as much damage in one turn as possible, so we want to run the Essence. Basically pick your Stab Essence, and Power Cuffs actually is pretty good on Nevermare because Nevermare has a high energy stat, and using Power Cuffs does benefit it a lot. And its Health Amulet can be something that you can use in case you want to have more bulk and survivability, because you do have that defense. And the TPs, 48 HP is leftovers, and 52 energy lets you use up to 3 bulk ups and use 4 or 5 Thistle Slashes or Phantom Slashes, which is pretty good. And 200 melee attack and 200 speed are the leftovers. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the counters and checks as well as the teammates. Defensive counters and checks are pretty simple for Nevermare. Mainly you want to run fire types and ice types like Seer Knight, Tundulant, Chartiki. Note that Barblast is actually an exception, and while you do have to stall a bit, you're basically going to win against Nevermare in the 1v1 unless the Nevermare doesn't crit, so yeah. Seer Knight is pretty good because while you do get critted just like the others, you do have Terrifying if you choose to run that. Tundulant can also bulk up alongside Nevermare, and of course it is an ice type. And Chartiki, while not having the best defenses out of these guys, it is a plant type, so it can absorb Thistle Slash, and it does have some good melee bulk, and of course it is a fire type with a range attacking move. And offensive counters and checks to Nevermare is also pretty simple as well. You want to run stuff that can outspeed it and hit it super effectively, or just plain out destroy it. Stuff like Deladrix, Garbantis, Hunder, Volcaloa, Pyrelid, and Zulong are some good stuff to use. Mainly, fire type moves coming from Volcaloa, Pyrelid, and Hunder are pretty good. Bug type moves coming from stuff like Garbantis and Deladrix, and Zulong with the ancient move is pretty good. However, there are more answers, but I particularly think that these guys are the best. And offensive teammates to Nevermare is also pretty simple. You want to run stuff that can help deal with the walls, which is pretty simple. You want to run stuff like Eclipse, Baneki, Phage Knot, Pyrelid, Zeppelin, and Benetode. Pyrelid is pretty good because you can deal with Barblast pretty well if you set up, and you can also deal with Seer Knight and Tundulant, which is pretty good. Baneki technically does pretty well after the Boom Bash buff because it can deal with Barblast now, it can deal with Tundulant, and I guess Seer Knight too. You just have to chip down a lot, and of course Baneki has to have a lot of survivability in order to do that. And Meditode, Eclipse, Zeppelin, Phage Knot, they're all pretty good because Meditode can break all the walls. Phage Knot can help get Nevermare in, and is of course pretty powerful and a great pivot. And Eclipse is mainly here because Eclipse is just really good. And Zeppelin is also here because it can help break the walls. And of course you can run other stuff like defensive teammates to Nevermare. Stuff like Barblast, Tyrex, Stratosaur, and Luminami are some good stuff to run, mainly because they can pivot in Nevermare. And of course Nevermare does cover their weaknesses pretty well, which is pretty good. You can run other walls, but technically these guys are probably one of the best, so yeah. With that out of the way, let's talk about the conclusion and my thoughts, so let's get along with that. So overall, I think Nevermare is a pretty good Lumion. I'm pretty sure I ranked it in the B+ range in my tier list video, but now that's ended, and of course there's a new meta developing, I think Nevermare is a fine addition. I don't think it's anything special, mainly because it has to rely on RNG to do boatloads of damage, but of course Nevermare doesn't really need that RNG. It is already on par with other regular cleaners and sweepers. It's just slower and a bit more bulkier. So that's just my thoughts on it. Like the video if you enjoyed and subscribe, and of course remember that Zulong is still a dumpster fire.